Hey beauties, welcome to the Clean Beauty Podcast. Did you know that unlike most everything else in America, cosmetics are not regulated? This means that corporations can use thousands of potentially harmful ingredients that I personally know can cause health problems. I'm your host, Cassandra McClure. I've been in the beauty business for over 10 years as a celebrity makeup artist that advocates for safer and more sustainable cosmetics. Join me each week for important news, exclusive interviews, and more on the clean beauty revolution.
This episode is proudly sponsored by lashbinder.com, a patent-pending tool that I developed to be the quickest, easiest, and safest way to apply lashes on yourself and clients. If you've ever tried applying lashes, you either use your fingers, which is pretty hard to master, a pair of tweezers, which can be super scary, or you were lucky enough to have a friend like me help you. Those days are long gone with Lashbinder, an applicator that'll have you looking fabulous in under a minute. Are you ready to say goodbye to expensive, damaging, and time-consuming lash extensions or hours spent in the mirror applying makeup? Don't you wish you could apply lashes easy and just go? Let your skin glow and your confidence skyrocket with the perfect pair of lashes applied with Lashbinder. Lashbinder is truly the lash tool you'll ever need. Be the first to get your hands on one today, exclusively at lashbinder.com. Be sure to find us on Instagram at lashbinder, LASHBINDER. Links in the show notes. Happy lashing! Today we have Savy Guthrie, founder of Theoderma Skincare in a dermatology PA with 15 years experience treating all different types of skin conditions, 20 years in medicine overall, a native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, born to Greek immigrant parents. Savy holds a master's degree from the University of Nebraska in physician assistant studies, a bachelor's degree from Drexel University in physician assistant studies, and a bachelor's degree from Tempe University in physiology. She is a member of the Society of Dermatology Physician Assistants and has attained Diplomate status by completing a rigorous dermatologist-developed course program. Okay, that was a mouthful. So you're a healthcare provider and you kind of entered in your own product line back in 2011.
That's true, yeah.
Is that right?
I started formulating basically for myself. I was treating patients in dermatology for a really long time, and I started having some issues with my own skin. And I wasn't really worried about it. I tried some topical medications. All my colleagues and my employer, who's a board-certified dermatologist, just said, it's rosacea. But nothing I did seemed to help. So after a little while, I started getting concerned, and I said, okay, well, I need to clean up my beauty routine. So I switched to all natural products, and that didn't really seem to help either. And just doing some research into formulating and spending time on chemistry forums and reading about products and the deconstruction of products and basically reverse formulating and how there's frequently ingredients that are hidden in products that aren't disclosed on the label, I just decided that I was going to start making my own stuff. And I did. It took a lot of work, a really long time, lots of research, long hours, and eventually I was making my own products, and I was really just happy with that. So starting a product line never even entered into my mind. It was just like years of patients asking me what I used on my own skin and me telling them that I made it myself, and them kind of beseeching me to produce them and put them out there, that finally I just thought, all right, maybe I will start a skincare company. And so it's been a long time in the making. And yeah, we launched August of 2018 officially, and it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so how are hidden chemicals and preservatives ending up in the natural products that we think we know are natural?
Yeah, that's a great question. And people are always sort of startled when they hear about stuff like that. And And not necessarily that it's intentional on the part of the companies that have these hidden ingredients. And then maybe sometimes it is intentional. It's really hard to speculate. But what'll happen is if you have ingredients like, let's say, botanical extracts, those extracts need to be obtained somehow from the plant. And so they're either, you've heard these terms cold pressed. You see that on like olive oil bottles, or maybe they're steam distilled, or maybe they're extracted using like a chemical solvent, like something like hexane. So those chemicals then are contaminants, basically. So they're not necessarily additives. But then you have other ingredients that are water based. So those are things like hydrosols, infusions, certain peptides may have water in them. So anything that has water in it needs some type of preservative, and there will be a preservative in those ingredients that those manufacturers are sourcing, and they just don't necessarily end up on the label because they're not ingredients that are being added to the product. And so that's how ingredients end up in products, and people just aren't aware of them. And so, like for me in dermatology, it was something I saw constantly because we would patch test patients and discover that they had allergies, and then we'd give them the list of things to avoid. And invariably they would try products and still have reactions. And so it becomes very frustrating for the consumer and for patients. And um, so our big thing is just complete transparency. We steam distill our botanical extracts in house, and any peptides that we source that have any water in them, we know exactly what else is in that peptide, and it's disclosed on the label. And so I joke and say, our ingredients have ingredients, and companies who don't, it doesn't mean that they're more green than we are. It just maybe means they're not as transparent, or maybe they just don't even totally know what's going into their products. So not necessarily that there's any like malice behind it. Maybe it's just not being aware of the process by which ingredients are extracted, and how they're sourced and stuff. So it's probably by accident. Although you got to wonder when you see these mass-produced products that are being made by the tens of thousands that are sitting on store shelves for years and years and years, how they can truly be natural. I mean, because patients ask me that all the time too. So there's a lot of misinformation, and people just have to do a lot of research. Really, it's frustrating for consumers, I know.
Yeah, gosh, it is really frustrating. And I have so many people. I was just at Jenny Kane today, and she's even friends with Greg, who started Beauty Counter, and she was still asking questions and just not sure of what she was using, and asking about Isla and different brands that makeup brands that she's using. And I don't even have all the answers. Like Greg doesn't have all the answers like you
Yeah.
don't. It's like it takes all of us together to kind of like get through it. And we were joking about Think Dirty because I've always pushed for people to go to Think Dirty, but even Think Dirty might classify something as an 8, but that's an 8 for someone who has a celiac allergy. So it's not an 8 for me. And so different systems grade on different things, and everyone has their own definition of clean and sustainable. And so it's hard to navigate, and it can get really frustrating, but I feel like that's why people come here and why the podcast is gaining so much traction, because I'm bringing on brands that I researched that were truly green and clean and working towards all of the good things and aren't out trying to hide everything. Or if they do know, they're not, they're actively trying to fix things. So it's really good to have you on today. And I was so excited to have you on because people need to know about your amazing products. And so, can we just talk about why products need preservatives?
Yeah.
Because a lot of my customers think that preservatives are bad. And in the beginning, I also thought that they were not healthy. But can we just talk through that, and just you can explain that from
Oh
your
yeah,
perspective?
absolutely. It's so important. It's amazing though how like preservative has become kind of this like dirty word, but the reality is that water will grow yeast, bacteria, and mold. And you can kind of do your own little science project. You can put some water in a glass, and you can just leave it on your counter and go back to it in a week or two and just take a smell, and it will smell bad. And that's because it's starting to grow organisms. So anytime you have a product that contains water, which the reality is any cream, any lotion is technically an emulsion. So an emulsion is when you take water and you take oil and you use an ingredient that will combine the two. So that ingredient, of course, is an emulsifier. It has an end that binds to water, it has an end that binds to oil, and then it brings the two together. So the water phase in a cream or a lotion will grow germs, and those germs are potentially dangerous. So I've seen over the years patients come in to the office with dermatitis and different types of eczema and basically bacterial infections on their skin. And it's been from using either products that are expired or products that were not preserved or products that were not preserved properly, sort of under preserved. So safety is at the forefront of preservation. And that's really the big thing is you don't want to become irritated, you don't want to have an infection, you don't want to have skin issues because you're using a product and you're trying to have the opposite effect. You want to look better and healthier, and so really safety is the bottom line. And so just like when you get sick and you have an infection, there's tons of different antibiotics. The reason is because there's lots of different types of bacteria. So when you're preserving a product, you need to have what's called broad spectrum coverage. So you need to be covering for all different types of bacteria. And then you also need to be covering for yeast and then covering for mold. So one thing isn't going to preserve and protect you from all those different organisms. There needs to be a variation of ingredients. And so somehow, like we were saying, preservatives have gotten really a bad rap, but they're necessary. They're absolutely necessary. The only time you can get away with not using a preservative at all is if it's an anhydrous formulation. So that's a product that contains absolutely no water. But then you're talking about things like ointments. So, any cream, any lotion is going to have water in its formulation. And so people's safety is basically the reason why things are preserved.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a lot of good information. So, how how are the expiration dates calculated then?
So that's a really great question. So they do something called challenge testing, which is basically they take your formulation and by they meaning professionals in a lab. So this is done in a lab setting. And they'll slowly introduce bacteria and mold and yeast into that product at a very specific, regimented, like certain parts per million. So there's like a scientific method behind how they do it. And then they'll see when they introduce that bacteria, does it grow? Does it proliferate? And if it does, at what rates? And they'll do that, every day, adding a little bit more, and then every week, kind of seeing how the colony size has increased of that bacteria or that yeast or that mold. And then by doing that, they can sort of extrapolate with normal use how long that preservative in that product will keep that product safe. So that's called challenge testing.
Okay, challenge testing. Awesome. And then what happens? So, how long do your products last? Do you think that they should be lasting a little bit longer, a little bit less than
So yeah, so a product that has no preservative at all. So when I was just making stuff in my kitchen and just using it on myself, I was keeping it in the refrigerator and I was using it within like 3 or 4 weeks. So obviously you can't sell anything to anybody if it needs to be kept in the fridge and it needs to be used within a month. And so we came up with a natural preservative system, and our products, from the time they're made, the recommended lifespan of them is 12 months. So it's not really a ton of time, to be like mass producing things. So all our products are small batch, um, but it's enough time for patient for I can't always say patients because I have patients on my brain, but it's enough time for customers to purchase something and to, because I mean, I know I don't necessarily, I should use something every day. I don't, I forget, it kind of sits there. It may take me like 2 or 3 months to get through a bottle of something. So people need to have that amount of time. So I kind of look at other companies that say like, oh, we have no preservatives, or we have very natural, ultra natural, limited preservatives, or whatever they're calling it. But I look at that product and I think like that's a ticking time bomb. You're going to put it in your medicine cabinet. Are you going to necessarily write down like, oh, I've got exactly 2 months to use this and then it needs to be discarded? Like, no, it's going to be in there. You may forget about it, maybe 3 months later. So people need to have enough time, like they're buying these products, they need to have enough time to use them before they spoil. That's kind of like on my end. There's the practicality of it as well. Now, having said that, natural products need to be stored a certain kind of way. Like you don't want to put it in your gym bag and then leave it in your car for 2 days. They need to be kept out of extreme heat. They need to be kept out of extreme cold. You don't want to store them on your windowsill and have them get direct sunlight. So, there are certain measures you need to take as well. Our products are all in airless pumps. That's important as well because it helps sort of prolong their longevity. If you have products that are in jars, and I know you know this, you're dipping your little fingers in there, so you're potentially introducing bacteria into those products. So, how they're stored, their packaging, that kind of stuff's all very important.
Okay, so side note is are there certain things that should be in the bath, like that can be in the bathroom? Because I know my bathroom steams up pretty well. We don't really have. I live in a really old house, and so we don't have that ventilation. So, should I be keeping my serums and creams and lotions out of the bathroom?
That's another great question. If you have the tops on, so for instance, if you have a serum that's a twist top and it's a dropper, you just make sure you keep your tops on and you keep them screwed on tight. If they're jars, make sure the lid's on and make sure the lid's on tight. Um, that's really the big thing. Make sure that if you do have a jar, you're not, and you are sticking your fingers in. You wash your hands first, and then you also make sure that your hands are dry. So you don't want to be introducing extra water into a product that's in a jar, because that water you're introducing is again not preserved, and so it's going to potentially break down that product quicker. It's also going to maybe make that product unstable, which is a whole different issue. That's a stability thing with how it's the emulsifiers and stuff. But yeah, so that those are all great questions. How you store your products. Do you leave them? You don't want to leave them open. You don't want to leave the tops off. You don't want to be putting wet fingers in. And if you do have a steamy bathroom, don't, I don't know that you would keep them in the shower, but like keep them away from the shower. Don't leave them on a windowsill.
Okay. I have like 4 different scrubs in my shower. One's a coffee scrub, one's a sugar scrub, one's a salt scrub. So those I have to dip my hands in. And I have the uh a mask like powder that I have to get wet to use on my face. Like I love scrubs obviously. So are those okay? Should I be looking to get more squeeze tube and more things that I'm not dipping my hand in because it's obviously hard to not get your hands like you're wet in the
Yeah.
shower. So I'm clearly like getting water in them. And I've always wondered about that because I'm like, okay, but it's salt, so it's probably not going to grow anything or oh, but it's sugar, so it's fine. But like I do notice that it gets wet in there and it's annoying.
Yeah.
So like
Sometimes scrubs are formulated to be anhydrous. So, like, I would suggest just looking at the ingredient label. And if there is no water in them, then you're probably fine. One side note, however, is coffee grounds are very bad for your pipes. And so I always, I always discourage people from using coffee grounds in their scrubs, really just for that reason. But salt, sugar, that kind of stuff is fine. If there is water in the formulation, then yeah, you are wet in the shower, and it's really impossible to get your hand in there dry if you're in the shower. So, if you can find that same product that you really like in a squeeze tube, that would be great. If they don't make it in a squeeze tube, one little idea is to maybe like to sort of dose out a little portion for yourself before you get in the shower so that you don't have to stick your wet hands in there. So I don't know how much of a hassle that would be, but that would be sort of one way around it, is to just kind of like scoop it out with a little whatever, a little spoon, a tongue depressor, or even your fingers, but just kind of, maybe put it on the lid of the jar, like scoop it out, close the jar, put it on the lid, have it in there like ready to go, and then just kind of when you're in the shower, access it that way versus putting your wet little fingers in.
You're talking about the shelf life of the natural products versus the shelf life of products that last like a long time. Obviously, fresher products or fresher and cleaner products are gonna last a little bit shorter amount of time. But there there are a couple companies as well that they're like, oh, it's like made to order. But what's the difference between small batch made to order and then like the really, really big ones? Because if they all lasted a year or they all lasted a month, like, does it matter? Like, what is small batch to you? Because if someone's doing a made to order, I don't know. I mean, I know one company that's like literally we make it to your order, but I mean, there's a company that Banish, they were just on last week, that, said we do made to order, but I mean, they're all the same products. It's not like they're formulating something just for me. So, what does that look like? Because I know, they said it would only be good for a month or two because there's like active ingredients and it won't work as well. So you said you do small batch, right?
Yeah, so I mean that's another great question, and that would be a great question for those people. Are they just kind of making that in their home? Would be my number one question. So I certainly could make something for you, and it certainly could be one of the products that I sell. And it could be you could text me and say, "Hey, can you make me this?" Sure, but it wouldn't be made in a professional lab because a professional laboratory isn't going to just make one, you know, calendula calming cream. And so companies that do sell products in that fashion, I always wonder how are they being made, where are they being made, and not to like down, I don't know any of these companies that you're mentioning. Maybe they're fantastic, but for me, it was very important to have everything done in an actual eco-certified laboratory that's professional for several reasons. For one, they make sure that everything is sterile, so a sterile environment is imperative, and they follow good manufacturing practices and guidelines, and then they get audited, and they have people come in and evaluate the machinery and test safety standards, and all that stuff to me is very important. It's almost like you're buying something, you're buying like a cake or cupcakes, and somebody's like making it in their kitchen versus somebody that's making it in a bakery. Well, you don't really know what's happening in that person's kitchen. I mean, I don't know how clean it is. I don't know, are they like licking the spoon and then dipping it back in the batter, versus in a bakery where there's like the health department's coming in and they're conducting, checks to make sure that everything's clean and everything's stored the way it should be stored. So, and not again, not that I know anything about these other companies and how they're manufacturing products, but for us, for me, it's everything's made in a lab, and so small batches. I mean, I could make as few as 10 pieces per product in an order. And that's a really tough to find a professional lab that's willing to do that. That also, all our products are vegan, and they're certified vegan, so we have dedicated vegan equipment. Um, so the quality and everything being done professionally, and especially for me with having a medical background, that was very important. Um, and so companies that are just making to order, and maybe you maybe only have a month to use them, maybe they're not being preserved, and that's great. Um, I just don't know how you scale products like that.
Yeah, that was my next question because I was really shocked to see some companies that were able to produce single or very small batches in a like a factory setting. Like I'm like, isn't that very, very expensive? But yeah. So, okay, let's switch gears. The physiology of the aging face. So, I saw you mention that and so I was like, okay, we have to talk about that because that is a very interesting topic that I think a lot of people are going to want to hear. And so we have to do a whole segment on this.
Yes. Well, and that's one of like my favorite topics because in my dermatology office where I practice, I also do all the cosmetic injecting. So I do all the Botox and the fillers and all that kind of stuff. And I do have lots of patients who come in that are vegan, that are all natural, that are just totally green with their beauty routine, but yet, they want Botox or they want Juvederm, and no judging. It's all good. So the face ages pretty systematically, and it starts, unfortunately, like in your late 20s, and by your 30s, there's some very specific changes that are happening to everyone. So the first thing that we notice is we start to lose bone mass. And people know that as you age, in your axial skeleton, you're losing bone. They've heard of osteoporosis and all of that. But what people don't realize is that you're losing bone mass in your face. You lose it around the orbital socket, so that's your eyes. You lose it around your nose. Your jaw starts to lose volume. Your cheekbones lose volume, and even around your teeth. And so that's very important because that's providing structure to things like your lips. Your cheekbones are providing structure, obviously, to the rest of your face, your lower face. I always tell people, imagine if you had a tent and there was a pole in the middle that was holding that tent up, and that pole was sinking. So as that pole is sinking, you can imagine that tent now is starting to sag all around that tent pole. So as we lose bone volume, we lose support for the structures of the face. We also then start to notice the fat pads that are situated beneath the skin, they start to atrophy. So they atrophy, and then the tendons and the ligaments actually that are situated underneath the skin that are tethering those fat pads in place, they start to become lax. And so we lose volume, and they also start to shift south. So you can kind of get that mental image of someone who's older, who's looking a little jowly, who's starting to get marionette lines, and then who's also getting a deepening fold. That's the nasolabial fold that runs from the nose to the corner of the mouth. And that's just what's going on underneath. Now, of course, in the skin, we start to lose collagen, elastin breaks down, hyaluronic acid starts to diminish. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Part of that is genetic, part of it is lifestyle, part of it is, do you smoke? How much sun do you get? So cumulative sun exposure. So it's definitely multifactorial. But those underlying structural changes are so very important, and those are things that a lot of people don't realize. They don't realize that that's happening. um, and so and that starts, like I said, in your late 20s, and by your mid 30s, mid 40s, you really start to notice changes. And as I said, like the eye socket starts to change. We lose bone volume, and as you see people that are older, you'll notice the outer aspect of their eye, the outer corner of their eye, maybe starts to droop down a little bit. That's because the eye socket's actually changing shape. So there's a lot that's happening beneath the skin that a cream's not going to fix. And that's the other thing. Like, we just try to be honest with people. I mean, the amount of skincare products that I see that advertise that they're going to make all your wrinkles go away, and they're going to make your marionette lines disappear, and it's just it's just not possible, because again, those are structural changes. What you can expect out of a topical product are surface changes. You can expect improvement maybe to the fine lines. You can expect like exfoliation, smoother skin, a brightening, maybe a lessening of hyperpigmentation, maybe an evening of tone. But if you're looking for deep wrinkles to go away and crow's feet, and you know, it's just not realistic. So, making these extraordinary claims are something that we just don't do. But so, in a nutshell, that's sort of the process of aging that we're all sort of facing.
Yeah. So my next question to you was going to be, is there a skincare brand that can help the aging process? But you kind of answered that there in the end. But I also wanted to ask about Botox. I know this episode is not about what you do and stuff like that, but in the office. But of course, I feel like everyone's going to want to wonder, like, or going to hope that I ask about Botox, because I get asked that all the time, because I used to do it. And then my fiance was like, hey, if you're going to go green and clean and all of that, like, you should really go inwards and you shouldn't get Botox anymore. So I haven't gotten it, but I want to know your opinion on that, because obviously I try to eat as good as I can. I try to work out. I try to do all the things. And of course, a lot of my clients in the health and wellness area and fields, they also want to feel young and beautiful. But like, Botox is that one thing for me that I feel like can look pretty natural, because, I'm not getting all those wrinkles. So that's the first question. The second question is it really going to be bad for your body? I know we all know botulism, but is there really what are the like biggest things that you've seen? Because I have met other clients, and I feel like for me myself, I have a little bit of sagginess on one eye. Like only I can see it, but I notice it. And so I felt like it was from the Botox. And so, what are the risks associated? Is it really something that you see long term? Like, I'm sure you have some clients that are coming in for years for Botox. So, is it something that really does make them look good over time? Or is that something that people are just telling us so that they can give us our next injection?
Yeah, all great questions. As far as you're really purifying your life. You're eating healthy. You're exercising. You're using clean products. Gosh, like what about Botox? And this is a conversation I have a lot with my patients. And the answer really is, you pick your poison. Like I- I'm an environmentalist. I try to recycle everything. Like I donate to all these animal groups and the World Wildlife Fund and the ASPCA. But when my kids were babies, like I just couldn't do cloth diapers. Like I'm sorry, I use disposable diapers. I know it's awful. I know they end up in landfills, but like I was working, there was still a lot going on. Like, so yes, so you just kind of pick your poison. I mean, there isn't anything that's going to make those 11s go away. It's just not. And when you look in the mirror, if that's what you see and that drives you crazy and that makes you look tired or it makes you look angry and people think you're upset all the time, um, and you get that fixed. Like, I personally think there's nothing wrong with that, and there's no judgment, and I don't think it makes you a hypocrite. It's just you live once, and if that's the one thing you do, I feel like that's really okay. As far as how safe is Botox? Well, it was around for decades, being used in a non-cosmetic application. So patients who had painful muscle spasms, something called torticollis, people who had tics, facial tics like muscle spasms, that sort of thing. It was actually developed by, I think, an ophthalmologist for an eye condition. And what they found was that, yeah, it improved the tics and the muscle spasms and all that other stuff. But they noticed that on the side of the face where they were using this product in a medical application, that people's wrinkles had improved. So it was sort of a by accident discovery, if you will. But so for decades, it had been used in a medical application. So its safety has been well documented. And of course, when it's used in that medical application, it's being used in much, much, much higher doses than would ever be injected into someone's glabella to get rid of their 11 lines. Um, so for me personally, I haven't seen any long-term sequelae in patients where they were negatively impacted. I've seen patients maybe that had Botox injected someplace else and they ended up with a little bit of a droop, and they come to me and I try to fix it. But when the product wears off in 3 months or 4 months, then their droopiness does end up going away. The other thing that I was going to comment on, and now it just popped out of my mind.
The long term. So, is it something that you can get as a preventative?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah. So if you Google, next time you or any of your listeners are sitting in front of the computer, if you Google the Allergan twin study. So I was at a conference a very long time ago, and they put up two photos, and it looked like one woman and the same woman like 15 years later. So I just thought it was, like they were following a patient over the course of a decade or 2 decades. But as I started explaining the photos, it was actually identical twins. And the one twin had tried Botox just once. She didn't like it, she never did it again. The other twin had done it for several years. And then eventually she stopped doing it as well. The drastic difference between the two photos was that these people were the same age. So they were the same age at the time that these two photos were taken, and they looked 15 years apart. And that's because while the one twin sister was getting her Botox done for those several years, she wasn't making those faces that were creasing the skin, that were creating those deep lines. So her skin essentially got a reprieve. It got like a 5 or 6 year break from the stressors of, making angry faces and squinting and grimacing and all those other things that we do. And and so that's when it really kind of occurred to me in this conference, like, holy smokes, there's a component of it that is preventative. And yeah, when that woman stopped doing her Botox and, eventually went back to making those faces, increasing the skin, she was going to develop lines as well, but she was never going to look as old as her identical twin sister. So that was kind of a real like aha moment. And you can see those pictures online if you just Google Allergan, who's the maker of Botox, and you just do Allergan twin study. So
Wow.
yeah, it's kind of nuts.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love to hear that because I've always told other friends or people that I meet, they're like, "Oh, you don't look 30." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been getting a Botox for since I was in my 20s." And they're like, "Why would you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I always just thought of it as preventative because I have a very active face. Like I move my face to say every single word. And so I just naturally was like, oh, every day I have these lines. Like, I bet if I had Botox, I wouldn't have those so bad, like lines that bad. And then, of course, they go away, and it does make me feel better because, like you said, you get those you call them 11s, like the lines in between your eyebrows. And sometimes you're right, people would ask like, oh, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I just have this really expressive face. And so I've always found that it is helpful, and when I don't have it, I don't like it as much. Like I really would rather spend my money on it because I've always thought it was good, but my fiance got me to stop because he's like, it's so dangerous, like it's so toxic, what if something happens? And started to do the scare method, which he's really good at, of like the what if this happened? What if your face goes numb? What if it's like, what if your eye starts drooping? Like, or, like all these scary things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I definitely wouldn't want that to happen either. So I just stopped going. And um, it's just nice to hear from someone who's not necessarily biased, like, oh, it's like not the best, it's not the worst, but it's definitely like safe, you know?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And you're absolutely right. For people who are very expressive, I mean, it is sort of a little bit preventative. And the other thing I will tell you is, and I have a lot of patients who come in and they work in an environment, like you're in beauty. So you're constantly around people that are really conscious of how they look. And a lot of my patients are like in the business world. And unfortunately, as a woman in the business world, I mean, you are judged on how you look. And so they're trying to stay youthful. And they'll say to me like, oh, some of the people in the office were kind of like, poo-pooing it. But they look so great. I don't know what they do. And I was like, well, I call bullshit, because these people that are trying to make you feel bad that look so fantastic, like I guarantee you that they're doing stuff too. Like don't let them make you feel bad about yourself and think that they just have like the perfect face, but absolutely they're doing absolutely nothing. And that's, I mean, if you're working with a 20-year-old, maybe, but like if you're in an office and there's like other 50-year-old women or and they don't have one single line and one single frown line and no crow's feet, and they're doing something. I mean, and don't let people make you feel bad about what you're doing. Um, so that's kind of the advice I give my patients. Like, it's your own truth, it's your life, it's your experience. You take care of yourself, you're in shape, you try to eat healthy, you do everything right. If this is the one thing that bugs you, then yeah, it's no judgment. You do what makes you feel good.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. It's refreshing in this house. Um, But anyways, okay, so I'm I guess we can I want to see if there's anything else you wanted to leave with everyone, anything you have coming up, anything to look forward to, and maybe just drop all the ways to get in touch with you if people have more questions, and then also like where to shop with you, and the links to get in touch. And
Yeah. So, just one final thing I will put out there is there's a lot of like really well-intentioned people that are like home crafters and maybe dabbling in essential oils. Um, you really have to know what you're doing with essential oils. There's a lot of essential oils that are not intended to be used directly on the skin. They need to be diluted in a carrier oil. There are other types of essential oils, depending on how they're extracted, that sometimes possess ingredients that can create reactions when you're in the sun. And this is something I had a patient actually experience this. She was in a yoga studio and they asked her if she wanted any essential oil. And she actually said no, but the instructor had some trace essential oils on her hands. And when she touched her arms to kind of like pat her down, she transferred it to the patient's skin. And then when she went out into the sun, she had a terrible reaction. And it's been over a year now of us trying to get rid of the scarring from that reaction. And so, my one word of caution would be for essential oils. People, if they're dabbling in them, or if they're, maybe purchasing products from home crafters, you just really have to be careful with that kind of stuff. And everyone's maybe well intentioned, but maybe not just the most informed. And so, healthy ingredients and natural ingredients can also have a dark side if they're not really utilized properly.
Yeah, so I use them for my home. I have like little bubbles that I fill up with water, with filtered water, and then I put the oils in there and it goes into the air. And I use a couple different ones from Friends, Young Living, doTERRA, and Isogenics. Do you know anything about any of those? And is that what you're referring to?
So if you're just doing them as like a diffuser, you're just kind of having it scent the air, those are generally safe. But if you're, mixing it into a moisturizer and applying it onto your skin, or if you're taking it full strength and just kind of, putting it, I have patients who say like, oh yeah, I just put it right on my face. And I really try to caution them about it. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to heed any advice. But so if you're just kind of diffusing it into the air, what you're doing is totally fine. But it's more a caution of if you're applying it directly to your skin that I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so topical use. Got it.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So getting in touch with me, I answer all the emails. So if you go to theodermaskincare.com, you can shoot an email from there, or you can just shoot an email to info@theodermaskincare.com. And like I said, I personally answer all those emails because patients will typically ask skin related questions, and I don't really trust anybody else to answer those. And so not that I don't trust my team, but I like to answer all the skin related questions. So that's one way to reach out. Just in general type questions, product questions. There's also a customer service number on the website. But if you want like to really get in touch with me, it would be info@Theoderma Skincare.
Awesome. And where is your or what is your practice called? It's in Philadelphia?
I'm in Philadelphia, but I work in New Jersey, and I've been at the same dermatology practice now for 13 years. It's Kessel Dermatology. So
Woohoo.
yeah, so if you're in the New Jersey
Next time
area,
I'm in the area.
yeah, yeah, thanks. You have to stop in. We can talk more Botox and stuff.
Yeah, well, we can talk or
Or
inject,
inject.
whatever you whatever you prefer. Um, yes. Okay, well, I need to make a trip out there. I've been due. I lived in Allentown for a little while and I traveled in and out of New York a lot. And so I have friends and I have some family over there. And so I try to make it at
Oh,
least once a year.
awesome.
So we'll have to
Yeah,
meet up for brunch
yeah,
somewhere in the
totally.
city. But yeah, but thank you so much for being on. I'm glad that we got to go over all things. We got to go over the danger of essential oils, like Botox, bone mass loss, and like all things that I had no idea about and I always wondered about. And I'm so glad we got to go over safety and testing and preservatives and all of that. So I can't wait to put all this in the show notes. If you guys have questions, check that out first. You can get in touch with Savvy there. And thank you again so
Yeah,
much for
thank you
being
so
on the
much. Your
show.
podcast is really great. You're doing, I think, a really great service to people that are trying to get into green beauty because it is kind of confusing for people. So, yep, keep it up.
It is.
Yeah,
I'm happy to
awesome.
do all the
All
work.
right.
Thanks so
Yep.
much.
Have a good night.
All right, everybody. So today's episode is sponsored by Lash Binder, and today's rating and review is 5 stars from Brenda at The Lip Lady. She says, important topics and very easy to listen to. It's a great way to get information and recommendations on current, trending, clean beauty companies and products. Oh my gosh, Brenda, so glad that you enjoy the show. I'm so happy that you just left us a review on Monday. I'm just seeing this now, and it's always nice to see new reviews every day. So thank you so much, and I'm so glad you're spreading the message of clean beauty. All right, see you guys next Monday at 8 a.m. Bye!
All right, so that's it for this week's episode on the Clean Beauty Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to head over to iTunes to review, rate, and subscribe to the channel. Until next week, stay beautiful.